Hi lovelies and welcome to the Witch's Cookery. My name is Bex and I've been a practicing kitchen and cottage witch for 18 years, and today I have something very special planned for you because I have two guests with me. The wonderful Scarlet Ravenswood that has a YouTube channel about paganism, neo-paganism, where she explains different kind of cultures and dives deep into pagan beliefs, pagan worship. She also makes videos on the different pagan holidays. So in general, if you're interested in that path, that's a really good resource to check out. And my other guest for today is Ella Harrison, who also has a YouTube channel on the Wiccan faith, the Wiccan belief. She is a practicing Wiccan and today she will share her point of view and beliefs with you. So if you're familiar with my channel, you might have gathered that I'm a secular and agnostic witch, which means that I don't practice witchcraft as part of a religious faith or lifestyle. I also don't dive too deep into the woo-woo aspect of it. So I thought it would be a fun idea to have three people from three different backgrounds talk about their pagan beliefs, their Wiccan faith, the differences that lay in all those paths, and of course also the things that we all have in common. So if you have asked yourself questions like what is paganism, or how do Wiccans practice witchcraft, or what is actually atheist or agnostic witchcraft, then this is the video for you. Grab yourself a cup of something, get a nice slice of cake because we will be here for a minute, and then we'll dive right into the witchy chat.
What is Wicca to you?
Oh gosh. Okay, so Wicca to me is just a very nature-focused religion. It's definitely a religion in believing. For me, I always work with the goddess, and I've actually recently started working also more with the god figure. For me, I do appreciate the more traditional Gardnerian kind of path, let's say. And that's kind of how I was raised, or how I learned it. And now I work mainly with like energies and stuff like that within that context. And nature is a really big part in my path. And the ceremonial aspect that is within Wicca, of course, is also, so for example, my altar, I have a very somewhat traditional Wiccan altar with that theme, and like the setup being feminine and masculine. And then I, in my personal path outside of Wicca, that, you know, where it kind of is eclectic, let's say, I liked to kind of add a little bit of things like crystal magic, or what else, you know, like kitchen element or hearth magic, let's say. Also like European or very German, let's say, or Germanic paganism as well, just because I'm half German. But yeah, it's mainly like the traditional kind of what you hear and learn about Wicca. High priestess kind of workings, let's say, in a way as well, and honoring the spirits and the elemental kind of energies, and yeah, as I said, the god and the goddess.
Right. Have you been initiated, or was it some kind of like self-initiation? I know it's like in different parts of Wicca, they have like different opinions about that.
So that's the thing. I never was in a initiated kind of coven, just because that was never a possibility for me where I've always lived, because I've always moved so much because I'm a military kid. So I did a self-dedication. However, I would definitely be interested in having like a formal initiation, because of course with Gardnerian being like the traditional form, of course, you know, people kind of argue with, are you even a real Wiccan if you haven't been initiated by a coven? So I personally think, you know, if you're living the Wiccan life, let's say, and you're dedicated to it, then for me it's fine, but yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, nice. So at the moment you're practicing solitary, like without any kind of coven. Is that-
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So Scarlett, can you tell us a bit more about your way of practicing? I know you started out with like being interested in Wicca, but you are now more into a specific path of paganism. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about you.
Yeah, my path has really evolved and changed over the years. I started with Wicca, and I still participate in a lot of kind of Wiccan traditions, especially the traditional 8 sabbats, as well as the sabbats. I love celebrating the holidays. That's a big part of my channel. So yeah, I really do love a lot about Wicca, and I also work with the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine and things like that, and incorporate witchcraft and certain witchcraft practices that tend to be more Wicca based. But in general, I kind of just shifted more towards paganism, in part because I'm kind of a history buff and I really love looking at ancient cultures and ancient civilizations and what their religious practices were, and trying to find some wisdom in this ancient history and kind of bring that into my personal spiritual practice. So I love learning about different traditions in, ancient Greece and Rome, but also in kind of Norse paganism or Celtic paganism. So that's something I've been really focused on over the past few years, is learning about these different cultures and seeing what pieces of them we can bring into our modern day practices.
So you kind of have that in common, because I think, Ella, you studied social anthropology, no?
Yes.
So that's kind of
Social and
also. Oh,
Yeah.
that's really nice. Lovely. Yeah, that's also a very big part for me, my practice, to just like look into the history and the roots of things. I think that we can learn a lot from that. And I think it's very valuable as well. You said that you follow like a Celtic and Norse pagan path.
Yeah, mostly. I think so. I'm still kind of figuring it out. And I'm by no means an expert on the Norse path or the Celtic path. But yeah, I'm gravitating more towards those traditions. And there is kind of even some overlap between them.
Yeah.
So I focus on those, but for my YouTube channel, I also explore other cultures as well, because I know there's so many different forms of paganism and different types of paganism that people are interested in. So I also, learn and chat about other forms as well.
Okay, thank you for this little introduction of yourselves and your path, basically. So, I mean, you both said that you are working with deities, the goddess, the god, or pagan deities. For that matter, let's start with Ella again. Can you tell us more about how in your Wiccan practice you do that? Do you only refer to them as goddess and god, or do you assign specific names? Do you also work with different deities? How does that work?
So growing up, I always kind of referred more to the goddess, and I just, never had one specific one. Like right now, for example, I see a lot of people work with Hecate. Hecate. Yeah. I always mess up on the English pronunciation on that one.
Same.
But for example, I personally, to this day, always just refer to the goddess, and I see her mostly in the triple form, which is quite common for Wiccans. But she's also quite prevalent in like a lot of the pagan, European pagan forms, with the maiden mother crone, and then you have like that triple goddess element that's in many countries in a way. And then the male deity, I've only, as I said earlier, mentioned, only kind of recently started working more with the more masculine side of things. So I think I tend more to Wodan, which is like the kind of like Thor, and not Thor, Odin. Sorry. And so I'm kind of exploring that. So I'm still really new with the more masculine deity aspect. So and even with the feminine one, I definitely did only really work with the goddess. So I never really started working with specific ones, like how many other people like to incorporate very specific ones from Greek or Egyptian mythology and things like that. For me, it's always just been the goddess. So that's really what I focus on most.
Okay, and how about you, Scarlet?
Yeah, I do work with different deities. Sometimes that depends on the time of year. For example, if I'm celebrating a particular holiday like Yule, I might work more with Odin, who is a deity who is more associated with Yule. Or for like Ostara coming up, it would be Ostar. Or there's different pronunciations on her name too. So sometimes it depends on which holiday I'm celebrating, or if there's a particular god or goddess I'm feeling really connected to at the moment. But I kind of view the gods and goddesses as more archetypal, like manifestations of the divine feminine or the divine masculine. So even though, I might be interacting with them in different, pantheons or different expressions of the divine masculine and feminine, I kind of feel like they're still kind of connected to this more maybe universal spirit and their avenues of connecting with it. So yeah, I definitely work with different deities depending on the time of year. If there's something I'm working on trying to achieve, so like bringing in a little witchcraft, I might ask for a blessing from a certain deity that might be associated with, what I'm trying to achieve for the spell. So it really does, vary a lot. But in general, I kind of just view the deities as these kind of sacred archetypes.
Perfect. That already kind of ties into my next question here, because obviously as a secular witch, I'm not an atheist witch, I'm more of an agnostic witch, I would say. But it also means that I don't really work with deities or don't really involve that aspect into my witchcraft. So I would be really interested to know in how you see the god, goddess. Like, is it like a manifestation or an archetype for some desire? Is it like a prevalent energy in the universe that is there? Is it like a creator? What does mean god or goddess for you?
So I have to agree a lot here with Scarlet. I also definitely see them more as manifestations of like an energy that you can kind of perceive, for example. That's also kind of why, for me, in the end of the day, all that energy sums up to be one big energy. And I mean, we can see that obviously with, especially, in certain regions where they have very similar kind of deities, but with different names. But in the end of the day, their energies really resemble each other. And then obviously you have the elemental energies that were, are personified kind of beings. And so for me, it's really more like an energy. I wouldn't necessarily see it as like, an actual solid kind of being living in clouds, sort of, I don't think that's what I would necessarily, I'm not sure, I've never really met anyone that's kind of had those views. So for me, it's more energy and like all kind of go into one. So even though we have like these different specters of, like, for example, we have Aphrodite, and then, in like Greek, or we have, Thor in the Norse, or, all these like Celtic ones, to me, they all are like tiny little fragments of one bigger element or one bigger thing. And those are like characteristics of that one bigger thing. So I'm not sure where I've read that. I know it was in some book that I read it, where they kind of compared it to a diamond with the facets.
Oh, that's really nice.
I'm not sure, it was one of those older books that I read a while ago. So I really can't quote who it exactly was. But yeah, where it's kind of explaining that it's one big diamond, and then every deity is one different facet. So if you are, wanting to work with love, for example, usually people work with like Aphrodite or like Venus and things like that, or, Freyr. Obviously it depends, but yeah, I guess you get the like idea what I'm trying to explain here. And yeah, that's to me personally. I think there's a lot more to it, and you could like definitely go on and on with this topic, but just to keep it somewhat short.
Oh, I really actually like the diamond analogy. I think that's a really powerful picture and something to think about. Well, Scarlett, you already started to kind of like answer that question. Do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, I definitely love the diamond analogy there. And yeah, I kind of think of it as if you take a topic like love, like you were mentioning, it's a force that's both eternal and it's more powerful than us. Love has existed before us and it will exist after us. And so it has kind of that immortality. And at the same time, it is so much greater than us, as physical beings. So I think there are certain things like that in the world, and every culture has kind of created a deity to represent these extremely powerful forces. That's why you have, like Venus and Aphrodite and like Freya and like all of these love goddesses in almost every culture. Yeah. And then on the other side, you have war. Like war is also eternal and powerful. And so there are countless deities associated with war. So I think there are these kind of energies or forces in the universe that are so powerful that every culture has kind of come up with their own version of trying to understand and connect with it, even though it's so much greater and bigger than ourselves.
Yeah, it kind of really reflects the overlying kind of issues in the different societies around the world. I think that's very true. And you can really see what keeps people's minds busy and the personifications of, or like the god and goddesses they have. That's very true. Yeah. So when it comes to witchcraft and especially spells, do you do a lot of spells or ritual in your practices? And also, how do you think a spell works? Like, if you would have to explain, how does a spell actually work?
For me, a spell or a ritual is definitely a more bigger sort of thing with energy-wise. So whilst obviously I have my coffee with intention and things like that, for me, a real spell is properly sitting down and having like the ingredients that I need and actually creating like this little thing, this little bundle of energy basically, and sending that out. Now, with me, it really depends on the time of year as well as how busy I am during that time of year. So sometimes I'm more active with spell work and rituals, and sometimes I haven't done spells in like weeks to months on end just because of like things that are going on. But when I do, for example, protection, I think I always try and have protection going on, even if it is as simple as like drawing some sigils or runes. Then for me, I think energy, I really like the entire vibration of the universe, and I like to tie back to more scientific ways of like, because I really need to explain why things work, and if I can't explain it, then I'm like, no. So for me, I explain spells in particular as kind of wavelength and sort of accumulating different energy, knowing that certain things have vibration and have energy that they kind of contain within them, and then bringing them all together to create this very powerful little bundle of energy and then releasing that. And I always envision it like a drop in a very still pond of water where it starts rippling, and then it'll with time have effect and reach the destination that it's supposed to, hopefully, or at least have some sort of desired impact, let's say. And so that's kind of really what I like to work with my spell work. I always have very color correspondence and like these correspondences basically for very specific things, and to then also not only on top of having all of those ingredients, but afterwards also taking like the needed steps. I think that's something that we have as a community started to talk more about recently, is you can't just expect things to work if you're sitting on the sofa and not actually taking like the steps to it as well, because to me spells also are door openers, and sometimes also simply a reminder or the act of it itself is some kind of manifesting reminder that you're more likely to actually take notice of opportunities that will then lead you to your desired outcome. And to a certain degree, I also really believe that magic is the placebo effect. So I really find it very, very, just to me, it's magic that we can take a sugar pill and still have at least somewhat there's the same kind of effect as taking normal pills. And for me, that just kind of speaks on terms of mind over matter and how much we can actually impact. So that's kind of what I also see spells as. And I always see people say, but how do you know it was a spell and not just something else? Maybe it was just a placebo. Maybe you just kind of made it up in your mind. And to me, in the end of the day, if I got the result that I desired, then I don't care where it came from, Obviously, it's an affirmation to me always personally, and I will always in my mind say, yeah, that was my spell work, or that was me manifesting it. But if someone says, oh, that was just a placebo effect, then I'm like, yeah, probably.
I very much share this, like especially in the agnostic witchcraft and atheist witchcraft community. This is basically how we explain spells. It's always the placebo effect, and I think it's super powerful. I'm fascinated by it, and how I understood you now, it's that you basically believe obviously in that part, but you also believe in like an accumulation of inner and outer energies. Scarlet, but how do you do spell work?
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with both of you in terms of why it works, combination of placebo and energy. And I do think that science-wise is starting to learn a lot more about this kind of stuff. There was a really fascinating book I read not too long ago called Real Magic, and it was taking a laboratory scientific approach to basically things like spells.
Oh, nice.
And measuring the results. And it's super fascinating for anyone who's like really into the scientific reasoning behind why spells work. In terms of the types of spells, I really like chaos magic. So like making sigils for spells. I do that a lot, in part because it's really easy. You don't really need that much stuff, just like a pen, paper, and then there's different ways to kind of activate the sigil. You can like burn it as like a really easy way. I also do a lot of tarot magic too, because the different cards can represent different intentions or even different deities. So I'll sometimes like place certain tarot cards in different places in my apartment as kind of tiny little spells. So I have the King of Pentacles as my lock screen on my phone. So it's always like making me go back to work, like reminding me to like get back to it.
Nice.
And then I will put different tarot cards on the fridge sometimes to like remind me to be healthy, or like I'll put the High Priestess under my pillow.
I love that.
So I do these like little things like that. It's just super. I don't even know if you would call those spells. They're just, mild little things that, impart a little bit of energy into certain areas of my life. So yeah, I do a lot of chaos magic. I do a lot of tarot spells, and then occasionally, like yourself, I like kitchen witchery. So sometimes I'll like choose certain herbs based on their correspondence for a meal that I'm cooking, or do a little incantation while I'm stirring, little things like that.
Oh, lovely. I really love that tarot magic thing. I think I have to try that out. That's actually ingenious, especially to like, it's just a little reminder for your brain to keep striving towards your goals, or I think that's really genius. Yeah, I mean, for me it's very similar. I mean, I do believe in a placebo. I don't necessarily myself believe in certain energies that, well, I wouldn't say I don't believe in it. I just am a very analytical science kind of person, psychologist, but like very deep within. So that's my belief, and I like to question everything. So how I do spell work is mainly based around herbalism, about psychological techniques, which obviously find a lot of use in spells as well. And I also believe in the power. I mean, I'm very much a cottage and kitchen witch and do like everyday simple witchcraft, but I also feel like the more time and energy you put into a spell, like searching for certain ingredients, for correspondences, for color correspondences, even if I don't believe they hold any kind of energy, I still believe that just the time you put into that, for me personally, helps you manifest it, or helps you concentrate on the outcome even more. So that's how I work with it in comparison to you guys. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about your daily practice, or your monthly practice, however you live your spirituality. Ella, you already said that with Wicca it's more like ceremonial magic and more ritual, and it's all tends to be a little bit bigger. And Scarlet, you just said with the tarot magic, it's sometimes also just these little quick things. Like on a regular basis, how would you say you practice your craft the most? Is it through like ritual, spell, or is it through how you live your life?
So for me, it's definitely more how I live my life. So whilst I do enjoy having the time to have like, proper spells, let's say, for me, I definitely see magic, or I try to see magic in like even the tiniest little things, and just have certain things like my jewelry or even perfume, for example, things like that, coffee in the morning, and as you said, like the cottage and like the kitchen witchcraft is very prevalent for me as well, for sure. Also, connecting with nature. We have a forest right nearby, so whilst we don't go for a walk every single day, especially right now because the weather is a little tricky, but when we do, I do definitely try to like just take it in and appreciate it and stuff, even though I might not actively be doing like proper, what you would think of as proper spells and things like that. It's just like internalized things for me a lot of time too. So I do a lot of like internal talking to the goddess. That's what I kind of explain it as, where I just kind of connect to like the energies and things like that. And also crystals are a really, really important part for me. So I will always have like crystals nearby or in the house, or like, on me. So I definitely work a lot with those. Again, I really am very fascinated by crystals with the wavelength and like the energy that I at least, see it as. I know, some people are like, oh, they're just rocks, but like, I don't know, for me, even if they're just rocks, they just definitely hold a lot of like emotional, at least to me, sentiment. And then, for example, little things that I like to do, as I already mentioned, are runes. I really like to work with runes. So, for example, I have runes in the back of my phone to protect. I also have a shungite crystal on my phone case as well to protect me. And then, for example, the ring I'm wearing is like garnet stone. And I have, like an oil that I like to dab that I made myself. That's for protection. That also has a rune on it. And then just, herbs as well, or herbs that I like to add in and things like that. And just for me, I think most of my, like for me, it's definitely like 80% just day-to-day little things. And then the rest is like more spell work where I sit down, in particular at the moment in front of the altar, and then sit down and like, do an actual spell with ritual, with ingredients and things like that.
Right. Actually, I forgot to mention in the little intro about you. I only introduced your channel, but for the people now watching, Ella actually has a crystal store, a shop that ships, I think, worldwide. So if you want to check that out, I'm gonna put it in the description box below for you to find.
That's so kind of you. Thank you so much.
No, of course. I always like follow you on Instagram and see all the pretty stuff you put out there. Personally, I don't work with crystals. I just never really gotten into it. I don't know why. I just never had that attraction to it, but I find them very, very beautiful. And I also see that you do on your Instagram stories a lot about like environmentalism and stuff like that. So I feel that's also like a part of like the Wiccan belief to care for wildlife and stuff like that. So I feel that's also maybe a way that you practice it in a more mundane kind of way,
I would say so too. Yeah, I think the environmental aspect is very close to my heart. So definitely, yeah.
Lovely. Scarlet, tell us more about your daily practice. I know you did an entire video on that. So if you guys are interested, please check her video out on that. I will also link it down below.
Yeah, like you guys, I tend to view this more as like a lifestyle. I'll occasionally do like spells here and there when there's really something I'm trying to accomplish or achieve. And then I do little rituals for different holidays or for maybe like a new moon or a full moon. But in general, just day to day, it's a variety of things. Like you guys mentioned, always trying to connect with nature and kind of build a stronger appreciation of the natural world, and noticing the subtle changes in the seasons. For me, that's been one of the biggest benefits to this path in general. I think I've gotten a lot greater mental health just from like forcing myself to go on a daily walk and like to notice the beauty of the natural world. So that's a huge part of it. Things like meditation, I try and do a little meditation every day. I think paganism is also kind of about celebrating our bodies in a way. So trying to be healthy and like, or eating whole foods can even be like an expression of paganism, or exercising, or just, being out in nature. I kind of all view those as ways to celebrate this lifestyle choice, I guess.
Definitely, yeah.
Mhm.
I also, because you just mentioned that you work also with the energies of the season, it's also something that I love to do. But now with your move, I mean, you have a completely different climate. How has that affected that?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. So I have to kind of relearn everything, because I was living in Chicago for like 8 years. So that was, a climate that had like the 4 traditional seasons. And now I live somewhere where it's completely different plant life and really different seasonal changes. And one of the things I like to do, and as a way to bring paganism into my daily life, is I always decorate with natural materials that I find on walks and everything like that. So I'm slowly trying to learn what plants are native to this area, what foods, so trying to eat more seasonally in association with the climate here in Texas. So yeah, it is kind of a big shift, but it's fun because I'm learning new stuff now, and I'm getting to kind of experience this whole different style of paganism. So my holiday celebrations, are now going to look a lot different
I can
probably than they used
imagine.
to.
Yeah. I guess for you, Ella, it will be similar now that you're going to Zealand. It's gonna be well. Also, then you celebrate the other way around. You know what? You're in a different hemisphere. So, are you going to switch the holidays around according to the seasons, or are you gonna stick with the dates that you're used to?
So I've been really thinking a lot about this. I've gotten a lot of questions about this as well. And so for me as Scarlet as well, the sabbats and things like that are super important. And in general, the seasons in the year.
Yeah.
But so I kind of have to figure it out when I'm there, and I've actually been kind of experiencing it. I've kind of thought about having the greater sabbats be the Northern Hemisphere dates, and then have the lesser sabbats be the local ones, but I'm not 100% sure yet, because to me it's gonna be very, very tricky combining the societal kind of celebrations of holidays with the pagan way of doing it, because obviously the pagan or Wiccan, of course, as well, way of doing things are celebrating the seasons. So, but at the same time, people are still celebrating Christmas, which of course is technically based on like Yule and everything, which is technically the winter solstice. They're celebrating it in summer.
Yeah.
So it's really tricky to like combine that, or even Halloween, Samhain, they're still celebrating it on the 31st of October in New Zealand as well. So that's technically Beltane. So I'm really going to have to see how I kind of do it. I'm thinking of redoing the Wheel of the Year just to my personal how I'm going to do it, because flipping the Wheel of the Year just based on Northern versus Southern Hemisphere, I'm not sure if that's going to work for me. So I'm definitely planning to talk about that on my channel for sure, because it's just something that's a really interesting topic, I think. And I think a lot of I've had a lot of people from the Southern Hemisphere kind of ask me, because they're also unsure, and there does seem to be a little bit of uncertainty on like what's the correct way of doing things. And I think we have that idea that there is one way to do it, and everyone's trying to figure out what that one way to do it is. But yeah, I think it'll be an exciting change, and I'm really looking forward to it for sure. And As Scarlett also said, for example, the plant life and everything is going to be very, very different to southern Germany, of course, or
yes.
for example, Korea, where I've lived the last 4 years. So very curious how it's going to be, but I'm very excited.
I'm very excited to see it once you're actually living there and how you're gonna
Yeah, me too.
celebrate. Yeah, I think that's a really important topic for many, many people. I see that question popping up everywhere in like every Facebook group, and so it's yeah, I think it's gonna be a great change. And that actually kind of leads me to a next question, because Ella, you said that you work now also with the Germanic traditions, or maybe, I don't know if you work with any kind of Bavarian or like Southern German folk witchcraft or anything like that.
Probably, okay, so I've grown up, my mom is Bavarian, my grandma is Bavarian, so I've been definitely raised in a very German way, even though we've always lived in different countries. So because I haven't really lived in Bavaria for much longer than 2 years, and that was when I was like 13, and at that point I was still very traditional, just Wicca. So I'm kind of learning a lot of those things and discovering, oh, I know that's from, like that folk tale, or, that growing up. But truthfully, not much has, made its way into my path as so far, at least that I'm really aware of. Perhaps there are certain things that I'm already naturally doing just because I was raised that way. But as far as the Germanic kind of section of my path goes, that's kind of been very recent, because I've really started working more with my like family's kind of, ancestry and things like that, and trying to figure out like what really works for me, because I think with Wicca, whilst it's definitely the foundation of my practice, I'm starting to like sense a shift as well, let's say. And so I think that's just been really like calling me. I've kind of looked at the Slavic side as well a little bit, because my mom's side of the family is like more, Germanic, and then like Slavic leaning. And then my father's side of the family is actually English slash, oh my gosh, I can't talk, slash Scottish. But, whilst I've definitely worked more with that side of the family while I was younger, I'm starting to slowly see myself being more and more interested in like the, German, and with that also the more Germanic as well as kind of Norse side of things.
Yeah, they're very tied together in some ways.
Exactly, they're quite similar. And then my fiance is Latvian, so he kind of has actually taught me quite a bit on the Baltic paganism, which is very
cool.
So I'm starting to be, like more and more interested in that. And like, I'm always, asking him questions like, how does that work with you guys? Because for them, they don't even necessarily call it paganism. They just say that's just how they live their day to day, because it's
a way of life. And I mean, the Baltics are also, I think that the area with the most pagans, or non-religious people.
He's nodding.
I lived in Estonia for a while, so everyone there was just like super witchy, but did not like call themselves like a witch. Right. And how are you going to do that when you move to New Zealand? Do you think you will like look into the culture there? I mean, it's obviously very like, I mean, the original culture there. Is that even a possibility, or you think that's very difficult, or something that you would be interested in, or are you sticking more to your European kind of background with craft?
Yeah, I would say I'm sticking more to my European background, just because I don't have any ties whatsoever to the Maori culture, or the Polynesian culture for that matter. So whilst I absolutely appreciate it, and obviously with, my anthropology kind of background, I'm super interested in it. I think I have, any, I don't want to say like business, but I don't, in broad terms, or very strictly speaking, I don't think I have any business being in the Maori like culture. So whilst, certain things are definitely super interesting, and I'm definitely going to take a look at how they do things, especially maybe to see how they celebrate the seasons. Things like that. I'm definitely sticking more to my personal background, and definitely more so would say that.
How about you, Scarlett? Because you live in the States, but you do practice from a more of a European kind of context. How do you kind of work? Do you work with anything that's, of course, not Native American maybe, but have you looked in those cultures that were there before to get some knowledge of the land, of the spirit of the land, as some might want to call it, from that? Or are you more drawn to the European paganism?
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, and it's something a lot of us, fellow Americans, we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I do mostly just focus on the European paganism. That's where my ancestry is, and Native American spiritual ceremonies they're closed practices.
Yeah.
So even if I, wanted to join, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to join. But at the same time, if you do believe that there is kind of a land spirit or a spiritual presence in the land, which I kind of do, it does make it a bit tricky. So like certain places do have a spiritual energy to it. Back when I was in Chicago, I would work with Lake Michigan as kind of a deity or a spirit of its own. So obviously that would be a spiritual presence that was existing way before, European settlers came.
Yeah.
There are certain, animals here in the States that have their own kind of power or presence or spiritual energy to them. So I might incorporate a little bit of that, or at least, noticing when I see certain animals, that knowing that they represent certain qualities, or, they might be a certain omen for something. So kind of, for the most part, just focusing on European style paganism, but still bringing in a little bit of that kind of land energy and land spirits
I think
into the practice as well.
I think that's really lovely, and it's really beneficial. Of course, you always have to tread the very fine line between appropriation and too nosy into someone else's business where you really don't belong, and just wanting to connect with where you live. I guess I haven't been in that situation. I mean, I lived in a lot of countries, but always within Europe, so it's always a similar context, at least. It's very easy to combine with what I grew up with. When it comes to your research for your craft, for Wicca or for paganism, do you guys have any specific kind of platforms or materials that you really enjoy, where you think like, oh, I get all my information from there? Or do you also work intuitively?
I would say I definitely started out with very traditional books, like the good old Gerald Gardner kind of, Raymond Buckland, Scott Cunningham, Dorian Valiente, things like that, and then obviously I've recently read more the newer kind of books, let's say, though I'm not super fond of them, to be honest. So kind of since I've got my more, traditional books, ever since then, I've been working much more intuitively. And when I do have certain questions, I do like to use Google a lot. So I do refer to that a lot, and then just cross-reference and things like that to make sure that what I'm reading is not just made up or, like pulled out of nowhere, basically. But yeah, I do definitely like to go back to those more traditional sources, and things like even older ones, even if it's more scholarly articles. I definitely like to look at those quite a bit as well with certain questions. But yeah, I would say for the most part, now at least, it's much more intuitive. But a couple of years ago, for sure, it was more based on like old school books, and obviously like right at the beginning it was like what's her name, Silver Ravenwolf, the teen witch, but then from then on you kind of move up, let's say, and you build your pyramid, let's say.
Okay, how about you, Scarlet?
Yeah, definitely. I was the same in the beginning, starting with like the Silver Ravenwolf, and then graduating to like Buckland and Scott Cunningham, and then kind of, moving on from there. Nowadays, I don't tend to buy many contemporary Wicca or witchcraft specific books. I tend to try, if I can, to find like some primary sources or, academic articles. Sometimes it's easier said than done. If I'm doing a video that's about a particular historic practice, I try and just find out, from a history book or from an article online or using Google to find out, what, people used to do for that practice. And then sometimes I might even, reach out to other people, through my, YouTube community page or on Instagram and like ask people too sometimes if I don't know. Because it's tricky to especially do videos on topics that I'm not, an expert in, but I still love to do, content like that. So I've done videos on like Slavic paganism, even though I'm not an expert, but it's really fun to kind of just see what you can find online and do your best. Of course, I'm not going to get it right every time, but
no, I think it's really, really hard, especially when it comes to paganism and witchcraft, because I mean, we only know so much of these cultures, and witchcraft is also not really a precise science, so it's hard to actually, like find. I think you always have to find stuff that also resonates with you. Obviously, like the historic things, yeah, you can find a lot of facts, but you really have to sometimes really dig deep, and it's tricky. But now I'm interested because I think, Ella, you mentioned correspondences before that you like to work with. Scarlett, I think you do too, because I saw some of your holiday videos had like color correspondences as well in. How do you work with those? Like, do you look that up online, or do you also work intuitively? Like, do you also find out correspondences for yourself in your practice?
So I do a combination once again. So if I'm absolutely not sure on some specific thing, like a herb or something like that, then I will look it up, because herbology, for example, I'm not like an expert in at all, but I like to combine it into my practice. So then I will look it up. With that, I like having books that I trust. And then also even for crystals, I've got one book that I was gifted when I was like 5 years old by my grandma, because that's the only book that would keep me occupied, and I would flick through that. So that's my go-to book for any kind of questions with crystals. But for example, with a lot of things, I do like to use my intuition as well. So if I see something that I don't necessarily resonate with online or even in a book, then I will definitely adjust it to be more resonating to me, especially if it is something that I work with frequently. So if it's not something like a herb where, it could potentially be either harmful or things like that. If it's like colors, let's say, or even crystals, then I definitely just adjust it to what the energy kind of feels with me and what feels right for me. So I know there has been, the talking of, for example, the color green being associated with prosperity. And then people were like, yeah, but that's technically not in all cultures, because, for example, in the States, green is, the money color, but that's also not in every country. So, there's definitely some certain leeway and things like that, where different cultures or different people simply resonate differently with certain things.
Yeah, most definitely. What do you think, Scarlett? How do you work with those certain correspondences?
Yeah, so sometimes I will work with the like traditional correspondences, though a lot of times lately I've been kind of rethinking it a little bit in certain ways. Like, for example, the 4 elements. So say you're doing like a ritual, and it's kind of a more Wiccan style ritual, and it involves calling in, the 4 elements into your sacred space. You have kind of the traditional correspondence where like water to the west. But what if where you're standing physically, water is not to the west, it's to the east or the south? So starting to rethink that and trying to place myself, well, where am I now physically? Is there a large body of water? In which case, that direction I should call in water. Where is the wind blowing? Maybe that direction I should call in air. is, which area is south? So that would be where it's hotter. Maybe I'll like try and call in fire from that direction. So I've tried to play around with it a little bit and try correspondences that are more situated on what I'm specifically doing and where I'm located. So yeah, I've been playing around with it a lot lately, trying new things. So I think there's a time and a place for certain traditional correspondences, but sometimes it can be fun to change things up and work with it more intuitively.
Oh, absolutely. I think I work mostly intuitively with my things because, well, mainly my practice is so Bavarian folk witchcraft centered, in what I show in my vlogs is very, traditional here, and that doesn't always match with the English speaking correspondences that you can find online. So I do love to look into like plants, for example, of how the plant grows or what the plant was traditionally used for. I look into like older, more mystical books like, I don't know, Ella, maybe you know Hildegard von Bingen.
Yeah.
So that was like a German mystic. So that's kind of like how I work with it. What do you say, Scarlett? I can completely subscribe to that with looking at your physical space and making it work like that. Like, don't like stick too much to the book when it doesn't really match with reality. I think that's also how I practice in my craft a lot.
On that note, I quickly just want to say, I think that kind of comes from, or people are kind of starting to adjust more to that idea of changing it up a bit, because I think a lot of times we have a very European way of, thinking of like craft and like paganism, but obviously not everyone lives in Europe, and then it doesn't make sense for them. So I think, changing, like for example, the idea with the north and south and east and west. In New Zealand, going south means Antarctica.
Right.
So definitely switching it up, I think, is really, really important. I think opening up the idea that it's okay is also really important.
Yeah, I do think it also stems from that most of the things we now can. I mean, a lot of people do their research now online or in the older, more traditional books, and these books are mostly, or like a lot of them, have like a Wiccan kind of background, which kind of centers around the Celtic English traditions, which obviously is only a very, very tiny small part of the world. And that just got translated to the entire globe and is now witchcraft. So I do think it's always good to open up your mind a little bit more and explore with different things and with different cultures in mind as well. I think that's really to connect more to where you live or how you practice or what your background is as well.
Definitely, yeah.
This video is more geared towards people that are interested in parts, so maybe just starting out. Do you have one very, very important piece of advice for anyone starting in the pagan or in the Wicca path?
Oh gosh, I think there's a lot, and I think once I get reminded of certain things, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a really important thing to like tell people that are starting out. I think with Wicca in particular, first of all, it's incredibly important to know Wicca as a religion, and it's not witchcraft. It's not the same. Also with paganism is not Wicca and also not witchcraft. Like there's differences. So I think with Wicca, what is most important in my personal view is to really get that foundation solid, and to research and learn as much as you can, and also look at historical kind of aspects of it. I have a little bit of a beef, let's say, with the newer books, because they tend to forget the history aspect a lot, or they kind of sweep over it very, very quickly. So I think having a very solid foundation of what Wicca is in particular and what it means to you, and to then be able to work your way up, is very important. And also to remember that you've got your entire life, and you don't have to become a pro in a year or, like a couple of weeks or months. You have a lot of time, and, you're only rushing yourself. So I guess that's probably my number one advice, though there's thousands tiny little advices as well. But yeah, that would be my number one advice for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think otherwise it gets too muddled waters if people are too on the surface of things, especially
Yeah.
if you enter a religion like Wicca. I mean, it's like a kind of a dedication as well. It's not only, I mean, what I do is more like, everyday life stuff. But especially with that, I think you have to dive into it and learn first where it actually comes from before you can, like, I subscribe to that kind of belief. And Scarlett, what do you say to people that are interested in paganism in general? What would be your advice when just starting out, when just getting interested?
Yeah, I think if you're just starting out, of course, it's beneficial to learn as much as you can. With paganism, there's so many different paths you can take. Some pagans believe in like literal manifestations of the gods. And then on the other spectrum, there's atheist pagans. So trying to figure out what path is resonating to you, and also taking time to maybe even explore a couple different paths and to learn about different paths to see which ones you really resonate with, and keeping an open mind, because the pagan umbrella is so big and can include so many things. You're going to meet people who kind of practice all different forms of paganism. So to keep an open mind and keep learning. And I think it's really beneficial when you're starting out to just keep a notebook. It doesn't necessarily have to be a fancy like Book of Shadows or a grimoire, but just to keep a record of what you're learning, how you're feeling about it, any, rituals or even spells that you might be doing, to just write all it down. And then, you can revisit it later and see, how you're progressing, how you're feeling about things. So I always definitely recommend keeping a record, trying things slowly, exploring and learning as much as you can.
Yeah, I think when you keep a record, it's also a great way to see how you develop, because obviously with this kind of paths, you never stay the same. You always learn something new. You always like find yourself in a new kind of situation where you maybe have different needs or different wishes and can incorporate that. So that's a very valuable kind of advice too. Thank you for that. Now, is there anything in your both parts or in the community, like in the pagan or Wiccan community, that you find problematic?
Oh gosh, I think there's a lot. I think, with time we will discuss more and more. I think the one that I see the most and that I struggle with the most personally also is Wicca having become quite a trend, where it's very surface. And obviously then there, a lot of things tie into that, like aesthetics kind of tying into it, and people not taking it seriously, or people thinking they can just jump from, like religion to religion, and again, not taking Wicca at all seriously, then at the same time conflicting information being out there, or misrepresentation of Wicca, for example. And it just creates this big thing that I think we currently are going to have to work through, and it probably will take a while. And I guess just social media and having, such like shining light, like a flashlight towards Wicca at the moment. Like movies are making, like Hollywood is making movies, and companies are, Sephora and things like that are creating, things targeted towards witchcraft.
They are. I didn't know that.
Like, it's just trendy right now. And I think obviously then, us as influencers, I guess, are we contributing to it, or are we like helping to steer away from it? Like, it's a really tricky kind of thing to discuss. And then I think a lot of people have very big opinions on it, and it can really get really messy as well. And to me, I think I personally am really trying to, especially at the moment, just go back and refocus and recenter and rediscover as well to a certain degree. And I've kind of set myself this goal for 2021 to kind of be more clear on, because I think to a certain degree, Wicca has also become wishy-washy, like blurry and like all encompassing, which it's not, So I think that's kind of what my personal interpretation would be, and what I personally am, finding problematic.
Interesting. How about you, Scarlett? What is your issue with paganism or some sorts of paganism or the community itself?
Yeah, there's quite a handful of different issues going on right now, I would say.
Yes.
On the one hand, talking again about like social media and stuff too, that's definitely a piece of it. And I think it was tricky for me to like get started because I am a bit more of a minimalist like pagan. So, and I'm not like aesthetically witchy at all. Like I'm super girly and bubbly. So I'm not mysterious. I'm not witchy like in appearance. So kind of
Your
trying
tarot
to
deck is super cool though and super witchy.
well, yeah, but that's because I created it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really good though when you see different types of witches and pagans and people just sharing. So social media is a double-edged sword because on the one hand, it can sometimes pigeonhole the community into a particular look or idea of what witchcraft is or isn't. But at the same time, it's also giving people who are all different, an opportunity to share how they personally practice witchcraft or paganism. So good and bad at the same time. Also, like with it being a trend, I remember I first discovered witchcraft in the late 90s, and witchcraft was really trendy then too. So
Yeah.
like on the one hand, it's like, thank goodness it was trendy because it caught my eye and I might have
Same.
not ended up here
Yeah.
without, all those movies that came out in the late 90s. So yeah, it's definitely, both sides of the coin there. There's a lot of other kind of issues with paganism. Norse paganism in particular is difficult because there's a contingent of like white supremacists kind of infiltrating the community. So that's definitely a concern. I think paganism in general can be tricky because it is such a wide-reaching thing. There is no centralized organized system. There's no hierarchy, which is good in a lot of ways, but also it can pose challenges in terms of kind of getting people together and getting people organized and planning events and things like that. So that's tricky too. I would love for there to be more in-person events or more physical locations pagans could go. But because we're kind of disorganized as a group, we don't really have those spaces.
Yeah, I think that's actually really a shame, especially with the events. I mean, here in Bavaria, everything. I mean, it's Catholic, but like in the Catholic beliefs, there you see so much of the paganism in there, and all the different festivities stuff we have. They're actually in its core super pagan. So we do have those kind of things under a different kind of umbrella, but especially like in the States or if you live outside those cultures, I think it's a shame that there's nothing there that you can actually like embrace that culture with all other kinds of belief systems or lifestyles or religions. You have this kind of organization somewhere. You have to do, Scarlett. You have to start it.
Yeah. Especially here in Texas, there is like a church on every single corner.
Yeah.
And I just want like one pagan temple in the city.
That would be amazing. Yeah, of course. So because I also feel it's on the rise. Like a lot of people are now getting interested. Doesn't matter in paganism, Wicca, or witchcraft. It's more and more coming. Even though, yeah, the trend also has its problematic, but I do also feel a lot of people are more drawn to like the roots and nature of it thing, I guess. And it would be lovely to have like places for everyone. For me personally, the issues I see with in witchcraft now is that people see it as a quick fix somehow. I'm a part of many like Facebook groups that deal with that topic, and I see people jumping just on there and being like, I need a spell for quick money, and they don't really get the concept of you cannot just like light a candle and suddenly you. So you're both in the public eye, obviously, with your YouTube channels and Scarlet is a tarot reader, and Ella, obviously, you have your crystal store, and well, you're also on YouTube. I think you also have a podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? I saw it once, but I never listened. I'm sorry.
Oh, cool. It's yeah, it's like one of those things where I'm like, I should do more, but we haven't, been consistent with that one at all yet.
Yeah, so how do you guys feel about living your path or your spirituality in a professional way?
I think for me, it's been very, very interesting, the shift, because I grew up with Wicca and with spirituality as a whole. And for me, growing up, I was teased, or I was like made fun of. So I just always kind of hid it. Or if I did ever get asked, I wouldn't even say I'm a Wiccan, because people would always be like, "What's that?" So, no one ever knew it. Or if they did, they would think it's like evil or something.
Yeah.
So I always just kind of was like, like pagan basically, or like, like that sort of thing, I guess I would always explain it. But, now with social media, it's definitely been quite a shift. And I've only actually really started to become super public about it in the last 1.5 years or so. Like if you scroll down on my Instagram, a year ago, I was still posting like regular pictures in like, vacation, things like that. So even with YouTube, I joined YouTube 2017, I think, but I haven't really done videos per se up to like maybe last year. And even, last year, I'm just like starting slowly to get into like a rhythm and everything for it. I think for me, the most interesting part is definitely the, I wouldn't say idolization per se, but people kind of, being like thinking of you as someone to look to. And I think that's been something that's kind of, obviously it's an honor, but at the same time, it's kind of scary sometimes when people put you on a pedestal, and there's certain pressure and there's certain ideas, and you also have to a certain degree, be very careful with things that you put out. So I think for me, I am definitely still like maneuvering, and I think it's a learning as you go sort of thing, and I think it'll never be just super easy and expert on it. So I think it's really fun. I really love the community. I think it's a really amazing community. I do have my YouTube spam thing on, so I don't really have or ever see unless I go on it like negative comments. So for the most part, everyone's really wholesome and supportive and kind. And I guess that's been the biggest shift, going from being completely solitary to at this point, having like a Discord, and having like YouTube and Instagram, and having like social media like friends basically. I mean, having just a community has just been really amazing to me, and I absolutely love it. So I don't think I would ever want to go back to how it was before, even though to a certain degree, I must say, because it was so to yourself, it was maybe in a way more, I wouldn't necessarily say authentic, but I think you maybe perhaps did it for more yourself, whereas nowadays, a lot of times, of course, especially with my Instagram, of course, my Instagram is very aesthetic focused, and then I take the more educational sort of things more on YouTube. So that's kind of how I structured things. So YouTube is more education, and Instagram, I just love like aesthetic photography and like editing and things and having fun. So I think for me, sometimes, obviously, especially with Instagram, a lot of pictures that I take are more so because I set them up. And that's not really the reality a lot of times. So I think, people sometimes also need to be reminded of that, which I also sometimes need to be reminded of, and work on. But as a whole, I really enjoy it, and I think it's really great. And I think more people that are in the public, that are out of the broom closet, let's say, I think it's a great thing. If you are able to do that, then, join that community and explore it and have, those social media friends. Yeah,
I found it very same, because I mean, I never really told anyone about this in my life, and then I started this 8 months ago. knowing nothing about the online community. And now suddenly I have so many people that I can chat to on a daily basis. So I do live cookings with my patrons that are super fun, where I can just I have witchy friends. So I think that's a really cool thing. I never knew anyone before that was really titling themselves as a practitioner, as a witchcraft practitioner. I mean, obviously here the culture is very you have a lot of tradition, but it's not the same. So that definitely thing. But I also understand what you say about it becoming a bit more staged. I obviously have that too. For usually I would go for the very easy stuff, and now if I film a vlog, I try to really think about a nice ritual that would also look, good on camera, where I can talk more than one sentence about. So it definitely can take away a little bit from your authentic practice. What do you say, Scarlett? How, because you have been also quite a while already active on YouTube, and I think also Instagram. So how is that for you, and also with your tarot reading business?
Yeah, it's definitely tricky sometimes, and I think it's gotten easier when I started shifting my YouTube channel away from doing actual spells or ritual stuff, because then I didn't have to worry about oh, I didn't set this up, aesthetic enough. So that's why one of the reasons I've kind of shifted more towards just fun educational content, in part because I really like doing that kind of stuff, but also I don't have to worry as much about the aesthetics.
True.
But yeah, it has its ups and downs. I think being a public pagan, I need to work on my spam filters on my YouTube comments, because I haven't really done anything yet. So every day I'm still getting 10 to 15, kind of hate comments, mostly from angry Christians who want me to go to hell.
Oh man.
But they don't really bother me. I don't really care too much about that. It's been great though, kind of with the community, finding fellow pagans and fellow witches, because where I am, I don't really have any friends that are also into this kind of stuff, at least not here. I did back in Chicago, but so my online community is really the only space I have to chat about these kinds of topics. So it's really wonderful in that way, that I can, reach out and talk to people about these kinds of things. And I'm hoping, eventually I will get a more kind of in-person community as well when things open up a little bit more. And so yeah, it's got its good days and its bad days, but overall, this is the best kind of job I could possibly imagine for myself. And yeah.
That's amazing. That's really cool. So you really found your calling in that, and now you're really passionate about it. Oh, that's so cool. Well, it was super lovely to chat with you both. So thank you again for taking the time and for doing this and share your experience with this community here. So guys, check Ella's and Scarlett's channel out. They're both linked below, and they're also linked cards above somewhere in this video.
Okay, lovely. So that was it for today. I do hope you enjoyed our little witchy chat. And while we're at that topic, let me know in the comments down below how you practice witchcraft, what your personal path is. I would be very, very interested to know how the people that watch my videos perceive witchcraft and perceive their spirituality as well. And I'm gonna see you very soon again in another video about witchcraft, the magic world, kitchen witchery, or some kind of fun vlog. Have a wonderful day. Bye bye.